Hey everyone, my name is Alex and I'm a retired US expat living in Spain, and we've got a big live for you. Today I'm joined by attorney Belén Batalla from Just Law Solicitors, and she's the one that managed our home purchase when we moved to Spain a little over a year ago. So I couldn't be happier to have her join us today so she can answer your questions about the process. So welcome, Belén. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Belén. I'm a property lawyer. I am also a partner at Just Law Solicitors and head of the property law department purchase process since the beginning. Since the client pays the deposit, most of the cases even before the client has paid the deposit, until the very end, until the purchase has been registered in the buyer's name.
Yeah, and she did a great job for us, and we're not the easiest customers. So thanks for your help with us last year, but great to have you with us. And if you have questions, just drop them in the comments and we'll get to them as soon as possible. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel at Alex in Spain so you don't miss another future Q&A live event. So we've got a lot of questions coming in. Let's dive right into it. So first question is, give me one second. There's so many buttons to push. All right. First question, Belén, how do I know the seller really owns the property and can legally sell it? That's an important question.
Yes, very important. This is, in fact, one of the first things that I do for every client buying a property. The first step is to request a land registry extract. You will see many people asking you to pay a deposit, seller or agents asking you to pay a deposit without proving first that the owner really owns the property. So the only way the buyer has to check that the seller owns the property and can legally sell it is through the land registry extract. We call it in Spanish nota simple. So this is the first step that I always take in every purchase. Then when you have it, you have to check, is the seller the only owner? Does the seller have possession and ownership of the property? Because in Spain, we have two different legal concepts for this. So it is important to check who owns the property, if one person, more than one, and if this person actually has full ownership of the property, or if this person has possession, or both. Yeah.
And for those listening, don't think that this doesn't happen, because as I've been a member of the various Facebook groups and different groups about moving to Spain and living in Spain, I see this quite a bit. And, I've seen it on the Move to Spain website, or not website, but Facebook group. So it exists, and it's something really important to have somebody on your side that can help check this out. Okay, question number 2. Can foreigners legally buy property in Spain?
Yes, everyone can buy a property in Spain. It doesn't matter if you're Spanish, if you're not, if you're a Spanish and a non-resident, if you are not Spanish and you are not a resident, or if you are not Spanish and you are a resident. What I mean is everyone can buy a property in Spain. The only difference is that if you buy a property as a non-resident, there will be a small tax that you will pay every year, which is called non-resident tax. Quite easy, the name to remember. So you will pay this non-resident tax every year. This is the only difference. Otherwise, everything remains the same. It doesn't matter if you are a resident or not in Spain.
Just out of curiosity, what does that non-resident tax look like if you don't live in Spain but you own property here?
So what the tax office does is that there is a calculation. What is the cadastral value of the property? So depending, that this is something worth mentioning too. We have the market value of the property, but the cadastral, the tax office also sets up a value of a property, which can be more or less than the market value. It depends on each property. So the non-residence tax is a tax that you pay if you have a property in Spain and you are not a tax resident here. And this tax is calculated as a rate. It can be a 1, a 2, depends on the property and the cadastral value. It's a rate of the property value in the town hall, in the tax office. So it
And I
is not
assume that
normally
those
a
are
big.
different from province to province.
No, it is different from property to property because each
Okay.
property has its own value. So depending on the cadastral value, on the tax value of your property, you will pay a rate as non-residence tax. For people to have an idea, it may be around 400 or 500 euros per year. Of course, it depends on the size of the property and the value of it. This is not the same as the other tax that everyone pays. It doesn't matter if you are a resident or a non-resident, which is IBI, the property tax that you pay every year. In this case, not to the tax office, but to the town hall. So the IBI is a tax, also a tax that can be around 600, 700. It depends on the value of the property that you pay to
Hmm.
the town hall every year. These are basically the two taxes to consider when you own a property in Spain. If you are a resident, you don't pay any tax for your main residency. That first property is out of taxes.
And that's a huge consideration, a positive consideration for those thinking about moving to Spain. Because I know when we had our house in the US in the state of Indiana, our property tax on the house alone was almost $9,000 a year. So this is, I mean, this is
So
like
this is
night and
the
day.
good thing.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the good thing of the Spanish system. As long as you are registered at the padrón, at the town hall in your property, and it is your main residency, if you're a Spanish tax resident, you will not pay any tax for that first property. Then, if you own a second, you will pay a tax. And if you own one or two properties as a non-resident, sorry, you will pay non-resident tax for whatever properties you have.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's look at the next question. Does buying property give me the right to live in Spain? So completely different.
Unfortunately, no. At least with the current law in hand. Well, as you know, the golden visa ended last year, sadly. So at the moment, we don't have any law that gives you residency for buying a property in Spain. No. The fact that you buy a property will always help because if you apply for residency or for a visa, you will need to register at the town hall as one of the steps of the visa.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, just for buying a property, you don't have any rights of living in Spain.
Okay. That's an easy answer.
Yes, very easy.
What about what happens to the property? This is, I mean, this, I can't wait to hear you talk about this one. What happens to the property if I die, divorce, or buy jointly in Spain?
This is a good one. So, well, first thing that I always say to all of our clients buying properties at Just Law Solicitors, when you buy a property, you should make a will, especially if you are not a Spanish citizen, because if you die without having a will in place, your heirs, of course, will need to bring original documents from your country. Depending on the country, the UK is very easy, US is also easy, but depending on the country in which you were born, for example, or if you had residency in that country for some years before the death, you need to obtain documents from that country in order to prove who your heirs are. This is why, in order to avoid all this time and money that it would take to get these documents from your country, I always recommend to have a will in place. So you make a will. Depending on the will, you can apply Spanish law or you can apply the law of your country, which is something very interesting for international people, especially because it may not be the best of your interest if you apply Spanish law. This is
Right.
a matter that it would take another podcast to speak about. But the important thing is that you make a will. Depending on who you want your heirs to be, it may be better from a legal perspective for you to appoint as the law that is going to be applied for your inheritance, the law of your country, or sometimes the Spanish law. But in most of the cases, we always recommend for the person to apply the law of his country, of his original country. So in this case, when the owner of the property passes away, we have a period in which the authorities will issue the death certificate. Once the death certificate is issued, we can request the certificate from the Ministry of Justice stating if a will was done and when. With that, the possible heirs, for example, a daughter or a husband, a wife, a spouse, can go to the notary in which this will was made and request a copy. You just have to bring it to the notary and sign a deed saying that you accept the inheritance. You don't need to prove that you are actually husband, wife, daughter, son, whatever,
Okay.
whatever family. Yeah, and then buying a property jointly. This is also something that we discuss at Just Law Solicitors with our clients a lot, because many people say, well, I will pay for the property myself with my own funds. Can I put it 50 and 50 in my spouse name or my daughter's name? We always recommend for the person who pays for the property to have full control of it. The moment in Spain that you put a 50, a 20, a 10%, whatever percentage of the property in another person's name, you
Mhm.
lose full control, which means that if you want to sell, you need the other person's consent. This is why I always recommend whoever pays for the property should be the owner in the paperwork. Then, of course, you can make a will and appoint whoever you want as your heir for the future once you have passed away. I am
Really
I
good. Yeah.
am asked a lot of times the question of, can I buy a property and put it into my son or my daughter's name? I mean,
And
you
and they
can.
ask that thinking that if I pass away, it will be easy for them.
Exactly. The thing about that is it has a very dangerous side. Of course, if we think on a fantastic world in which families don't have any issue with each other, that's perfect. But it is not always like that. So just to avoid any problems in the future, I always recommend for those parents who want to leave the property to their sons or daughters to make a will instead. That way, you have full control of the property while you are still alive, and you make sure that when you pass away, the property will be
The
transferred
directives are
to
there.
your children.
Yeah.
Some people also seem to think that you will save taxes if you do this. But actually, in Spain, the law that states the amount of tax to pay for inheritance, which is the case of the will, and for donation, which is the case of I buy a property, but I don't put it into my name, but I put it into my children's name, is the same tax. It is exactly the same tax, which at the
Okay.
moment in most of Spain is zero. So this is why I always explain it doesn't have any logical, or it is not easier for them or anything, because in the end it will not save you any taxes. Just for everyone listening us, in Spain, if you are a daughter or a son, in most of the cases you will not pay any inheritance tax.
That's a lot of information right there. A lot of really good information too. And this was actually one of the services that you all provided for us last year is doing the will. In addition to
Exactly.
the making the purchase for us and helping us with taxes, but also with the will too. So thanks. That's a lot of information, and I hope everybody got that. You might need to repeat that one or replay that one about 2 or 3 times to get it all, but really, really valuable information. Um, let's go to the next question. How much should I budget questions are always like the best because people always want to know what else I have to pay because it's just in our minds to think when we buy something there's something else that we have to pay. So, what is the on top of the purchase price budget?
Yes, we have a graphic for that. So it depends on the area of Spain in which you are buying. For example, for our
Which graphic
clients,
is that? Sorry.
the graphic of the cost, the
Okay.
general cost.
Oh, cost after. Yeah.
Yes. So you have to add basically three expenses: notary, land registry, and transmission tax. Earlier, we spoke about the two taxes that you pay when you own a property in Spain: non-resident tax if you are a non-resident, and IBI to the town hall. It doesn't matter if you are a resident or not. Now we are going to speak about a tax that you only pay once when you buy a property in Spain, which is called transmission tax. For example, here in Andalucía, and we also have a picture for that, Andalucía in comparison to Comunidad Valenciana. Here in Andalucía, the amount for transmission tax is a 7%. On another hand, in the area of Casablanca in Valencia, it is a 9% currently. So if you're going to buy, for example, in Andalusia, which is where we are based, you can add maybe a 10% of the purchase tax on top. If you're buying in Costa Blanca, well, it may be a 12, 13, more or less. What you have to think is we have three expenses when you buy a property in Spain. Transmission tax, which depending on the area in which you're buying can be 6, 7, 10, 11. Notary fees and land registry fees. Notary and land registry depend on the property price, on the number of pages of the deed, but normally just to have a rough idea, it may be around 1,400 each one. Land registry is always a little cheaper, but I always prefer for people to have a higher idea in their heads and then to get a good
Absolutely.
surprise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the three expenses that you need to put on top of the purchase price.
So, I mean, this is pretty hefty, and this was a surprise to us when we came from the US, having to pay so much on the front end. But the trade-off is you don't have the property taxes every year that you have, again, for example, in the US. So in the long run, you're much better off. But this also prevents people from coming to Spain and buying and flipping houses a lot, right? Because it's too costly to buy a house, renovate it, and sell it 3 months and keep doing that over and over because you're paying so much money on the front end.
Well, actually, there's a special rate for those people buying and selling properties. But that's
Oh,
a different matter for people
okay.
who have companies for that. But that's a different matter. In general, yes, this is the rate.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Next question. There's a comment. Um, I think you've got some fans out there already. It says the comment was "Go Belén." Um, okay, so here's one. How long does the buying process take?
Okay, that's a hard question to answer actually, but I would say around 2 months since you make the offer until we go to the notary, we complete, and you have the keys in your hand. More or less 2 weeks, 2 months since the offer has been accepted. But you have to bear in mind that our heads are tied here, which means if we start the process and we see that the property has something that needs to be dealt with, or that the property, for example, a very common thing that happens in Spain is that the land registry, the town hall, and the reality of the square meters of the property and the plot will not match. This is something that always surprises people, but in Spain it is very common. In this case, if the seller has to make any change or to sign any deed to correct this, then it may not be 2 months, it may be a little more. Or, for example, if the property doesn't have an occupation certificate, and in order to issue it, the town hall would require some works to be done. In that case, it may be more than 2 months. But idealistically, if the seller has all of the documents in place in 2 months, or well, I think I have my record in 2 weeks. A client some years ago found a property. The seller was actually very diligent and had everything prepared. And when I started the due diligence, I had everything, so I could complete in 2 weeks. But that's not, that's not
That's the other end of the spectrum.
yes, exactly.
Well, I will say, from personal experience with Just Law Solicitors, I think we made an offer on an apartment in Valencia. I think it was October 28th, year before last, so 2024, and we closed on it December 11th. So I mean, it was like 6 weeks, and I was pleasantly surprised how fast it was. And of course, we didn't have to do too much because you had POA and were able to do everything for us.
Yes, so we have some purchases that are quite easy. It basically depends on how willing is the seller to cooperate. If the seller is willing to cooperate and to obtain all of the documents that we request, it will be easy to complete in a short period of time. The problems are when the seller doesn't want to spend money in obtaining legal certificates, or in these cases, it is when we see the times increasing. But if the seller is willing to cooperate, yes, in 6, 8 weeks, we can be there.
I think it was easier to purchase the house once we made the deposit than it was to get an appointment to view the house. Because, in Spain, nobody wants to make an appointment with you to view their house that they're trying to sell. It's the craziest thing to me. But anyway, we'll go to the next question. Um, can I buy without traveling to Spain? That's an interesting question. And do people do
Yes.
this?
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, we have every year we have more clients that buy the property without even visiting it in person, especially for new buildings. So if you see the property in an online tour, you fall in love with it, you absolutely want that property, you make an offer, the seller or the agent accepts your offer, you can sign a power of attorney in your country. Some people ask, do I mandatorily have to go to the consulate? No, in most of the cases, our clients go to a public notary. They sign the power of attorney and send it to us by courier. In that case, we have the power of attorney here. We don't need our clients to be here at any stage of the purchase. Of course, unless you want to attend the notary appointment for completion yourself, or if you want to visit the property personally, which is, of course, something understandable. But as I told you, well, every year I have more clients that they decide to buy without even visiting the property.
I mean, as long as they're comfortable with doing it that way, it can happen.
Of, exactly, yes.
Okay. All right.
Or
Uh,
in most of the cases, the most common situation will be that you come for the viewings, you leave, and you don't come again for the rest of the process.
okay. All right. How about should I hire a lawyer before paying a reservation deposit?
So as we started our conversation saying exactly this, my ideal situation is when I start assisting a buyer when the buyer hasn't paid and hasn't signed anything. Because the problem is that if you sign the reservation contract and you pay the deposit, what happens if after that I request some documents in order to make the due diligence and the agent says no, or the seller says no, I'm not willing to do this? What happens? There's a gray zone there that reservation contracts provided by agents never state. So what happens if something goes wrong? If something goes wrong, I mean, not because the property is illegal. This would be very easy to see that the buyer is entitled to request the refund of the deposit. But what happens if I request something and the seller just says, no, I don't want to spend the money on obtaining that? The problem that we find as lawyers is that the law doesn't state what is mandatory for a person to sell a property in Spain. The law doesn't say that in order to sell, the seller must provide the occupation certificate, for example. This is why, in practice, some sellers may say, no, I don't want to provide it. It is not mandatory by law. This is
okay.
why, if we start acting on the buyer's behalf since the beginning, since nothing has been paid, since nothing has been signed, I can state all of the documents that will be mandatory to be provided before completion, not because the law obliges the seller, but because we have signed a contract stating that these documents are mandatory for this purchase.
Well, and a lot of times too, and I think we were a little victim of this, is that the seller or even the selling agent, they put your back up to the wall to make it urgent. Like, well, we've got two other people that are going to come in here and buy this property this afternoon if you don't sign this paperwork and give us a deposit right now.
What gets me upset of this is that most of the cases that's not even true. When they
Right.
tell you I have another person, just last week I remember we had an agent calling several times a day saying there's another person interested. Our client wasn't sure on proceeding with that property, so I told her, well, then go with whoever you want because my client is not sure yet. Well, just yesterday, 1 week later, she told me, is your client still interested? Which means she didn't have any buyer. So
Right.
that's the problem. Of course, there is a small percentage of cases in which there's actually someone interested. I'm not saying in all cases it's the same, but it is true that in most of the cases, the reality is that there is no one interested. It is not
It's a
so
sales
easy for
tactic.
someone. Exactly. But it works because,
Yeah.
in fact, most of the people that come to us already come with a reservation paid. Well, not most, but some
Yeah.
of the people that we assist. In the end, of course, the soonest we start working, the better, because the soonest we start working, the less money you have paid, and the more time we have to speak with the agent and to see, or the seller's lawyer, and to see if they are willing to provide these documents. But idealistically, the best moment for me to start acting is before you have paid, before you have signed anything.
Yeah, completely agree. Hopefully everybody's listening to that and don't get cornered by by an agent telling you that you got to do it right now or it won't happen, because more than likely that's not the case. Um, Question: what legal checks should be carried out before I sign anything?
So as we spoke earlier, first step, always the land registry extract. Who is the owner? Is there any other owners? Is maybe someone who has the legal rights of having possession of the property? This is the initial legal check. Can the seller actually sell the property to me or not?
Okay.
Second check will always be, what is the situation of the property in the town hall, in the land registry, and in reality? We see many cases, the client telling us, I fell in love with the property because it had a very big pool. We see the paperwork, no pool. What happens there? I mean, I'm not, of course, there
Wow.
is a pool, there is physically a pool, but
Yeah.
not legally. So then the question is, when was this pool made? I mean, how long has it been there? Depending on how long has it been there, we may need to legalize it if it is not legalized. So the first check will always be who the owner is, and then the second one will be to check the physical situation and that it matches the legal situation of the property. Then third one, to agree with the agent or the seller's lawyer about the documents to be provided before completion for us to make the rest of the due diligence.
And again, that's something that is off of the hands of the buyer. That's something that the attorney and team take care of, all of that,
Exactly.
which is, if you're buying from outside of the country, I mean, there's no bigger help than having that team on your side. Um, could I inherit debts? More, I can't wait to hear this one, because when I saw this question, it just kind of made a light bulb go off in my head, that you really don't know what you're getting at any time if you're trying to go at this alone. So can I inherit debts, mortgages, or unpaid community fees as part of the deal?
Yes, in fact, if you don't cancel them before completion, you will inherit them as the new owner. So this is something that can be checked in the land registry extract. When we start the process, we see there is a mortgage register. That's not a problem at all, as long as we cancel the purchase before we complete sorry, as long as we cancel the mortgage before we complete our own purchase. So the process is, when we plan all the documents for completion at the notary, we will make sure that we have the certificate from the community saying that the property doesn't have debts with the community of owners. We will make sure that the seller's bank has provided an updated certificate saying the amount of mortgage that is owed. So we don't pay the seller the full amount. We just pay the seller the amount that is free of charges, and the rest will be paid to the seller's bank in order to cancel the mortgage. Same with the IBI. We were speaking about the tax that you pay if you own a property in Spain. Well, if your seller has a debt of IBI, you need to obtain by completion a certificate from the town hall saying this debt is 1,000 euros. Okay, then we deduct that 1,000 euros from the purchase price and we pay the town hall instead. But
Okay.
yes, if you don't do all this, you will inherit this debt.
I mean, there's so much to know. I mean, and it's impossible for somebody coming into a new country to know any of this. I mean,
The problem is,
and I say that as an outsider. I say that as a third party, because, even though we've already gone through the process, there's still a lot of these things that you're telling us that I wasn't aware of.
yeah,
It's
well, I was actually about to tell you that we don't tell our clients every single step. This is why, of course, you didn't even notice if the
I
property
thought it
had
was
a
just a
mortgage.
smooth process, Belén. I just thought that you were on the other side of the ocean, just signing some documents on our behalf. But to hear all of it, I mean, I knew it was more than that. But It's just, it's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
eye-opening.
there's actually a lot of work behind a purchase, even though the purchase is straight away, even if the seller has been very easy to deal with and has provided everything, there's a lot of work behind every single
Because you
purchase.
can't
And
just take their
actually,
word for it.
so the thing is, many people seem to think that the notary will do all these checks for you. And the reality is that if you attend the notary appointment for completion and you have not checked all this yourself, the notary will not check these things for you. So it is important to have an independent legal representative on your side who checks all this.
So when you send a note to somebody like me and say, Alex, tranquilo, we're working on some things. Don't rush. We'll get there. It's with good reason.
Yes, always.
I
Yeah.
wish I wish I knew this a year and a half ago. I might have made your life a little better.
Oh no, my life was good enough. Don't worry.
Because I mean, I'm sure there are some people, and I'm not the most patient person in the world. I mean, I think it's like type double A, they say. And, I was always emailing you, where are we? Where are we? But you move things along so quickly and so fast. I can't thank you enough.
I have to tell you, I prefer when clients ask and when they don't ask. And I'm always very communicative and I always send them emails saying, we are doing this and we are doing that. And sometimes it's like, thank you. Okay, thank you. Well, if you ask me, at least I'm not talking alone. I'm not talking by myself. So
Exactly.
I don't mind people asking. In fact, I prefer it.
Thank you for that. Here's one you've kind of skirted on this. What happens if the size of the land registry does not match? And how do you say that? Cadastre?
The cadastre, yeah, in Spanish it's catastro, the cadastre,
Okay.
yeah. So the cadastre is the authority that is linked to the town hall. And this is what we were speaking about the pool. Let's go with the same example. So
Yeah.
you have visited the property, you fell in love with it, but the pool is not in any of the paperwork. What happens? Hopefully, the seller has built the pool with a legal license from the town hall. If that is the case, it is just a matter of signing a deed, a new building deed, going to the notary, signing it and registering it in the land registry. In 6, 8 weeks, you have it done. The problems come when the seller has made any of these works without the license from the town hall, or when the license have or the work, sorry, have been made only a few years ago. So there is an infraction. So depending on the work that has been done, if it was done some years ago and the seller is willing to fix it, it will be just a matter of a few weeks. But if these works have been done only a few years ago, so only 1, 2, even 5 years ago, depending on the area in Spain in which you are buying, the term for the infraction will expire or not. So depending on this, if the work is still under the period in which the town hall can issue a fine, in that case, it may be even necessary for the seller to demolish it. It really depends.
Wow. Wow. Here's an easy question, I think. Do I need an EA before I can buy? And maybe
Well,
explain what an EA is, because there might be some people out there that don't know that.
it's an easy one, but many people get confused with this one. So an NA number is basically a tax identification number that you will actually need if you want to buy a property in Spain. Now, many people tell us the agent has told me that I need an NA number in order to make the offer or in order to sign the reservation contract. No, that's not correct. The only moment in which you will need the NI number is when you sign the purchase deed at the notary, because that will be the moment in which you will pay transmission tax, 7%, 9%, whatever tax, depending on the area of Spain in which you are buying. That is the moment in which you will need the NI number. So we said before, normally the purchase process takes around 2 months since the offer has been accepted. So in that 2 months will be the moment in which you will need your NI number.
So you
By
don't need to
then,
get that ahead of time for anything. From the time
no.
people can be looking for a place to buy, and when they decide on a place, say, hey, Belén, this is where we want to make an offer, and the process will start for that purchase as well as the NIE, the NIE,
Exactly.
because I think for
Exactly.
us, the NIE took like 2 weeks. I mean, a quick process.
Yes, it is quick. But the thing is that you don't mandatorily need it if you are not going to buy until some months later. But in any case, yes, you will need it in the end of the process, and it is something that as lawyers we always obtain ourselves with the power of attorney. So people don't
Okay.
actually need to come to Spain to obtain it or to go to the Spanish consulate in their country. With the power of attorney, we can easily obtain it ourselves.
Okay, great. And then what about a Spanish bank account? When do you need that?
If you have a property in Spain, it is always advisable to have a Spanish bank account in order to set up the supplies, electricity, water, garbage, internet, IBI. It is always better to have one. Now, we have many clients who have a Wise account, for example, in
Mhm.
euros. In that case, many of our clients decide to use the accounts in euros and don't open a Spanish bank account. But if you're going to be a resident to live in Spain, I always say it is recommendable for you to have it just in case.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, or you're new to the process, in Spain, it's really nice. I mean, at first for us, it was a little annoying because we didn't understand the process, but it's actually a nice process in that all of your utilities, I mean, your phone, your gas, your electric, whatever, they automatically draw from your account. So in the US, and I think Canada as well, and probably some other countries, they send you a bill and you have to, write a check to them or pay them electronically after you get the bill. So here it's not like that. So one, you have to maintain the account, but the bigger surprise, you have to maintain money in the account because you don't always just get a notice that hey, we're going to take out $200 for electricity in a few days. And if you're operating from the US and sending money over, sometimes that takes a few days. So it's an interesting concept, but it's nice because we're not getting utility bills in the mail. I mean, we hardly get any mail, and you probably are used to that already. We get maybe one thing in the mail here in Spain per month. But beyond that, it's you got to have a bank account for all the utilities, and they take it off the top. We've got, let's see, we're 37 minutes, so we're going to see how long this next question is and assess because we're about ready to wrap up. What about mortgage? Because people are always wanting to know, can I get a Spanish mortgage as a non-resident?
Yes, you can. Everyone can get a mortgage in Spain. Also, because of the age, many people ask, I'm retired, can I get a mortgage? Yes, you can, depending on of course, on your circumstances, as in every mortgage, but you can. The only difference is the rate of the mortgage that is going to be applied. So some banks do not grant mortgages more than a 60 or 70% if you are a non-resident. But for the rest, everything remains the same. And yes, absolutely, you can get a mortgage from a Spanish bank without being a legal resident.
How do they, I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but how do they do their credit checks if you don't live in the country?
They check the documents from your country. Most of the banks in Spain, they are very used to international people buying and selling in Spain, so they will know all of the documents in the US, for example, whatever forms you have there, or the UK, they are very familiar with these countries.
Okay. And let's see, we are going to look at one more. Here's one. Because a lot of people are thinking, I want to buy and then rent. I want to buy and then sign it over to Airbnb or whatever the case may be. So, can I legally rent to tourists? And this has been in the news so much. I mean, since we've moved here now, a year and 4 months ago. But what do you say?
So, yes, but it depends on the property. It really depends. We have different rules depending on the area in Spain in which you're buying. And even within the same province, we have different rules in every town hall. So, for example, here in Malaga, there are a few town halls that are no longer granting these licenses. So when a client comes to us saying, I want to obtain a tourist license in this town hall, it's a no. Only a few of them, but in Malaga Center, for example, they are not granting them. Now,
Okay.
it is very important if you want to obtain a tourist license to rent out on holidays, which means like per days or per weeks or on holidays to tourists, to make all the legal checks since the beginning. So you don't pay anything, you don't sign anything until we make a study of the feasibility of you actually obtaining that tourist license. If it is not possible to obtain the license, for example, because the property doesn't have an occupation certificate or because this town hall has restricted the rentals, in that case, we also have another ways of renting out, which are short-term rental or long-term rental. We have, for example, a tourist that comes to Spain for 6 months. Well, you can rent it out to that tourist. But if you intend to do is to obtain a tourist license to put the property on platforms like Airbnb or Booking, at the moment with the current law in hand, we don't know what will happen with the next government, but with the current law in hand, it is important for us to make all these checks before you commit yourself to the purchase.
Okay. All right. We're already at 40 minutes. I can't believe how fast the time flies because this is such good conversation. It's such good information. I don't know how anybody could attempt to tackle this on their own without representation. And, thank goodness that we had you and the team. And this is in the description of the video, but just so I can say it out loud, I'm not getting compensated for this, for having Just Law solicitors. I'm happy that we made the move. I'm happy that they were our partner to buy our house for us and get us situated in our house when we moved to Spain. So, disclaimer, there is no exchange of anything here. But I'm just glad that they were our partners. So, they can be your partner, and the information to contact them is in the description of the video as well. I think I put in there the contact form, I put the website, the WhatsApp. I'm sure they'll reach out to anybody, but I can't thank you enough for being on here today. There's a lot of other questions that we haven't even touched, so maybe in the future you can come back for a part two.
Of
But
course.
I'm sure people would love to hear from you again. And for everybody, thank you for tuning in today. Belén, thank you so much for all this valuable
Thank you.
information. And we'll see everybody again real soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Alex. Have a very good
Bye-bye.
day. Bye.